talk about the chordates and the vertebrates. So a chordate is members of the animal kingdom. They're in the phylum Chordata, and they have a dorsal hollow nerve cord and a notochord. So I'll show you a picture here. The notochord runs through the animal from the anterior to the posterior, and then there's also a nerve cord that runs along that notochord. So all chordates have a notochord. Some of them might only have that notochord in one phase of their development, but we see it in all chordates. A vertebrate is an animal with a backbone, so it definitely has a vertebral column. So this is an endoskeleton. The skeleton is inside of the animal. They have a spinal cord, so that is this dorsal hollow nerve cord, and the front end of the spinal cord develops into a brain. We have several classes of vertebrates. So we have jawless fish, cartilage fish, bony fish. The amphibians are vertebrates. The reptiles are vertebrates. Birds and mammals are all vertebrates. So let's start with fish. Fish are anything with gills, scales, and fins. And the first fish were jawless. And looking at our evolutionary history, the Devonian period was the age of fishes. That's when we saw this huge explosion of the number of fish that were within the oceans. Some things that set fish apart from other animals: fish have a two-chambered heart. So the blood passes over the gills and it picks up oxygen, and then it's basically circulated throughout the body and then around again. Some of the things that we see that are different in a fish is it has this operculum. So over the gills is basically this plate called an operculum, and that protects the gill structures. They have scales, and so that protects the outside of their body. They also have this very large organ that's called a swim bladder. And the swim bladder is almost like a balloon inside of the fish, and it helps the fish remain buoyant. It helps the fish basically float within the water so that it can swim. And then another thing that fish have is they have this lateral line system, and this runs, you can see it on the outside of a fish's body, but that lateral line system is what allows fish to sense vibrations. So if you've ever went fishing with somebody and they were telling you sit still or don't throw rocks into the water and things like that, it's because fish sense those vibrations. They're very sensitive to it, and they will swim away from those vibrations. Well, let's talk about mammals now, because mammals are pretty much everybody's favorite animals. Some things about mammals that make them different from other animals is that they have hair. So all of them have hair, some of them less hair than others. They have specialized teeth depending on what they eat. They're endothermic, so that means that they regulate their own body temperature. They all have mammary glands. Most mammals have a placenta, and mammals also have a diaphragm. So the evolution of mammals, we see that we know that there were mammals even in the Jurassic period, but they were very small and tiny and tended to hide a lot, which makes sense because they didn't want to get eaten by the dinosaurs. But then in the Cenozoic area, we saw that mammals started to dominate. So they were starting to fill in those niches that became available, and they started to get larger. And so we saw a lot more mammals in the Cenozoic era and forward. So mammals have to stay warm, and because they're endothermic, they regulate their own body temperature. And so they need to basically insulate themselves. And hair is what does that for most mammals. Even marine mammals will have some hair, but they really insulate themselves with their subcutaneous fat layer, which is really the blubber that these large marine mammals have. Mammals have specialized teeth. So they have incisors for biting. And they have canines, and those canines are those long teeth that allow them to grab their prey and hold on to it. And then they have molars for crushing and grinding. So with predators, what you'll see is that they have really large canines, and you'll see those large canines coming down out of their mouth because they really do need to stab and hold that prey. With the herbivores, you'll see that they don't have those really long canines, but what they have is they have larger flat molars because they need those to crush the plant matter that they're eating. Mammary glands are only found in mammals, and they are used to produce milk to feed the young. Mammals also have a diaphragm. So any of you that have ever been in choir have heard your choir instructor tell you to sing from your diaphragm. Well, what the diaphragm does is it contracts when you take air in so that your lungs can fill. And then the diaphragm relaxes when you exhale, and that way your lungs get a little bit smaller and pushes the air out. So mammals have to circulate blood, and mammals have a 4-chambered heart and double loop circulation. So all mammals have the 4-chambered heart. Reproduction. Most mammals give birth to live young and are considered placental mammals. Now, there are 2 exceptions to this. Monotremes lay eggs, and marsupials develop their young in a pouch. So let's talk a little bit more about that. All right, so the order Monotremata, these are the monotremes, and they are egg-laying mammals. They're only found in Australia. They have characteristics of reptiles, but they also have characteristics of mammals. And because they have those mammalian features like hair and mammary glands, they are considered mammals. And then there's the marsupials. So the marsupials, they bear their young in an immature state. So their young's very tiny, very small, and it goes into the pouch and it develops inside that pouch. And these are mostly found on Australia. Then we have the placental mammals. And placental mammals, they have what's called a gestation period. So in placental mammals, the young is held inside of the female's body, and so the female has a uterus, which is basically the space that the young can fill, and it has this placenta, and the placenta is what develops the nutrients for that infant. Now, there are about 4,000 different species that have placentas. It's a very diverse group. So humans are placental mammals, mice have placenta, and so do elephants. And then even the whales have a placenta.